Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special Children's Week chat. I'm Bruce Leslie, president of First Focus on Children. Today, we are happy to celebrate our third annual Children's Week on Capitol Hill, a week where advocates around the country highlight the issues that imperil our nation's children and call on our country's lawmakers to act in the best interest of the child. We're thrilled today to welcome Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, who represents the 1st Congressional District in Pennsylvania, was recently named a champion for children by First Focus Campaign for Children. Congressman Fitzpatrick, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here. Awesome.
So there's a piece of legislation that we wanted to talk to you about that you introduced that's really important to kids. It's HR 6797, which is referred to the Chipper Act. It's a bipartisan piece of legislation by you and Congresswoman Wild from Pennsylvania as well. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that bill and kind of why you introduced it?
Yeah, Chipper is an acronym for the Children's Health Insurance Program Pandemic Enhancement and Relief Act. So basically what it would do is it would increase support for the state's children's health insurance programs during COVID-19. And while enrollment in CHIP continues to nationally increase as a result of this pandemic, there's clearly things we need to do. And without action, federal funding for this program is set to be cut in October of this year, which we can't allow to happen. This bill will help provide much needed coverage for the duration of the pandemic. And as we all know, so many families and children depend on CHIP, which is an amazing program for critical medical care. And this bipartisan legislation that I introduced, which supports and strengthens CHIP's federal medical assistance percentages for states, will also help ensure critical access to health insurance that provides comprehensive coverage for children, including coverage for vaccines and mental health services.
That's fantastic. Well, we really appreciate your doing that, and I'll note that last time we looked, there was over 60 co-sponsors for the piece of legislation, and we're doing our best to help you get additional attention to it, and hopefully we can make that happen. I just wanted to also point out to some of our friends who will be seeing this is that you are one of 40 representatives in Congress who was named Champion for Children this year, which is an honor that we designate to leaders who repeatedly use their legislative roles to raise, lift, and move to the forefront issues that are important to America's children. And so you've always been such a fantastic supporter of kids, and we have sort of the mantra at First Focus that kids are often seen as an afterthought because they don't vote and those kinds of things. So just wanted to ask you, you've been such a champion, which requires you to work on a range of issues. Could you talk to us about some of those and other things that we may be should be pushing harder for that you've been a champion on?
Yeah, I always like to say that children represent roughly 25% of our population, but 100% of our future. And there's a lot of priorities that I've been working on, particularly in the area of pediatric cancer research. It's one of the most heartbreaking situations that any family and any parent could ever endure. And I've met several people in our community who have lost children to pediatric cancer, all different forms. One form that is perhaps the most difficult to deal with because there's literally a 0% recovery rate is something called DIPG. So I've been working with the pediatric cancer community to introduce legislation. One of them is called the Fairness to Kids with Cancer Act. So while people under the age of 18 comprise of roughly 24% of our population, only about 4% of NIH and National Cancer Institute funding is dedicated towards research for pediatric cancers. So we introduced this bill recently. It's a bipartisan bill. Myself, Josh Gottheimer, Elise Stefanik, Mike Kelly, Brendan Boyle, and Stephanie Murphy, representing all parts of our country, introduced this bill. And what it basically does is it seeks to adjust federal funding levels for pediatric cancer at a fair percentage rate than is currently allocated. And it would also ensure federal funds for pediatric cancer research, that they match the same percentage of the number of American citizens under the age of 18 as part of the general population. There are very few things more heart-wrenching than childhood cancer, and no child going through this should ever have to suffer through the pain of cancer, nor should any parent ever have to deal with that. And it's interesting to note, according to the American Childhood Cancer Organizations, approximately 1 in 285 children in the United States will be diagnosed with cancer before they turn 20. And advocacy and legislation is really the best way to help reach out to members who are not only, if they're not yet supporters, to get their constituents talking to them about this bill. So it's been a big fight for us. Obviously, because when you're fighting over cancer research funding, there's all sorts of interest groups that get involved. But advocating for kids with cancer is the most important, because these are kids who haven't even started their life yet. And I think it's the most important that we gear our cancer research towards them. And moreover, research into pediatric cancers often yields very, very good benefits for adult cancer types as well.
So one thing I think that people would be really interested in is, you're such a great champion for kids and also on healthcare issues. And so and some often we find ourselves really trying to pound on the door to get people to pay attention to kid issues, and so I guess a question for you is, what drives and motivates you to be such a powerful champion for kids, and when there's so many other issues that could really capture attention and squeeze that out?
Yeah, I mean, that's our job. Our job as citizens and as public officials, we have no higher responsibility than to take care of our kids, whether that comes to school safety and ending gun violence and keeping our kids safe in school and in our communities, to dealing with rare diseases, some of which I mentioned. There's a lot of different types. I'm on the rare disease caucus as well. Every kid, every child deserves an opportunity to be happy and live that childhood life where they get to fully express their emotions and explore their imagination and expand their horizons and enjoy that time being a kid. And there's so many things that can rob children of that experience, a necessary experience, by the way, in order to grow into a healthy, both physically and psychologically and emotionally healthy adult. That's all dependent upon and contingent on a healthy childhood. And part of a healthy childhood is making sure that kids are in environments that allow them to thrive, and also are free from health circumstances that could be prevented or could be mitigated that would in any way take away from that childhood experience, because it's really, really important when kids are kids that they get to be kids. And we've all seen the manifestations of that not happening in adulthood. So, our kids are our priority. Our kids are our future. We have no higher responsibility as citizens, as human beings, or as elected officials than to take care of our kids. That's
awesome. We really appreciate that and those words. And one kind of last question I have for you is, do you really get the whole range of the lives of kids? You're clearly a huge supporter of children's health care, but you're also a leading co-sponsor of bills on education, on child nutrition. So you really get that sort of whole child approach. Do you have any advice for the children's community, or even for your fellow members of Congress, about how can we get more people to sort of join you in the great work you're doing for kids, and get others to be as great as you are on these issues?
I always recommend bringing kids in as advocates for the cause, because nobody with a heart and a soul can ever say no to a kid. And it's good for them because it gets them involved in the legislative process. It teaches them how Congress works. And bringing a kid in sometimes to explain to a member of Congress the importance of legislation, how it's impacted them directly, oftentimes can be very, very effective. It's a great learning experience for the kids. to come to Capitol Hill. And it's also a very effective form of advocacy. So I would recommend that highly.
That's awesome. Well, Congressman, I know you're very busy, but we really want to thank you for all the great work you do, for being a great champion for children, and for speaking with us today. Thank you for your time and for helping us celebrate Children's Week. And that's the week of June 14th through the 20th, where we're really trying to raise awareness to these really important issues facing kids. Is there anything else you want to close with?
Just thank you for having me, and thank you for all the work that you guys do. You guys deserve our thanks as well. The advocates for causes are so important because, as you all know, in Congress, we have so many things that we deal with. Given current events, a lot of things pop up that may derail legislative projects that are also very important, but sometimes time-sensitive issues come up, whether it be COVID or the challenges we're dealing with now with regard to the community and police relationship that sometimes can derail some of these really important projects that we're working. But it's people like you and your organization and the advocates for children and children's legislation that really keep the focus on. So it's very important work you do, I promise you.
Well, thank you, Congressman. And just a final reminder to people watching this today is, we really urge you to support the Congressman's efforts, particularly on both his children's cancer initiative, but also HR 6797, which is referred to as the CHIPPER Act, basically to protect the Children's Health Insurance Program funding going into the coming year. So if you call your member of Congress and ask them to support the Wild Fitzpatrick bill, that would be fantastic. So thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
All right, appreciate it. So that does it for this Children's Week chat, but tune in all week on our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube feeds, where we'll be speaking with other champions for children and discussing ways to make children a priority. Until next time, thanks so much.